Hello, hello, and welcome to PD in Your PJs. I'm Julie, and I'm so excited and honored that you're choosing to spend a half hour with me today for this quick training. I'm going to give you lots of things you need to know to get started with Seesaw with middle school and high school students, and I can't wait to help you get started. So, if you joined us a few minutes ago, you probably saw on the screen that we had some instructions for you for how to get your second device ready. You're probably watching this on a computer maybe or a tablet. We recommend that you have a second device handy so that you can play along later, so that you can kind of play the role of a student and kind of learn how to use Seesaw, just like your students will be doing here in the coming weeks as school starts. So go ahead and get that second device ready if you haven't. You're looking for the Seesaw Class app. The icon is pictured there at the top of the screen. And don't worry if you don't have a second device handy. We'll definitely go through everything you would need to know if you wanted to try this later. You will also get these slides and this recording coming to you in an email later, so you can even watch this again if you need to. So you probably saw something like this on your screen a few minutes ago. Hopefully here you see the name and the picture of the type of device you're using. We're talking about your second device, not what you're watching me on right now, but what you're going to use to play around with Seesaw. So maybe it's your smartphone, maybe it's a Kindle or iPad, or maybe it's a second computer. At any rate, you can find Seesaw on every one of those devices. So just don't forget you're looking for that Seesaw Class app. It's going to be called Seesaw the Learning Journal, but you're going to see the word class in the icon if you're getting it in your app store. Of course, if you're on a computer, you're just going to app.seesaw.me. And if you're on some sort of smartphone or tablet like an iPad or a Kindle, make sure you're using that device's app, not the web browser. If you have used Seesaw before and you've already had this app on your device, make sure you're updating the app. You're going to want to make sure you're using the most current version, and that's 6.0. And that's just because a lot of the features I'm going to be talking about today are new and have been updated and improved. So you want to make sure you have the most current version of Seesaw ready to go for our training today. And like I said, if you're on a computer, app.seesaw.me, and these are the browsers it'll work best on. You'll be getting to a screen that looks something like this, but don't worry, you don't need to log in or create an account or anything like that. We'll have plenty of time for that later. So if you are supposed to be in brand new to Seesaw grades 6 through 12, you are in the exact right spot. You are maybe joining me live right now, but maybe you're watching this later as a recording, even on YouTube. And if so, I want to make sure you know where you can access these resources and slides. So you can see a URL or a website typed at the bottom of your screen. That's where you can find these slides later in case you're not watching me live. If you are watching me live, then those slides are going to come right to your email in just a few hours. And like I said, my name is Julie. I was a high school ELA teacher for 18 years, and I taught a lot of different English language arts electives, including speech, debate, drama, all of that good stuff. So I'm going to have lots of really practical ideas to share with you, things that I did with actual middle school and high school students in my building over the last few years. And I'm just so excited to share those experiences and ideas with you today. I'm now on the teacher community team at Seesaw. I would love if you could find me on Twitter. I'm at EdTechJulieJ. If you can, go ahead and give me a follow. I share lots of things related to Seesaw, and I would love to connect with you there. So as you're watching and listening today, if you have questions that we didn't get to or we don't answer, or even a topic that I didn't address, be sure to reach out to me there on Twitter. And of course, you can connect with our whole team on Twitter at Seesaw. So here's our plan for today, and I've been hinting at it some, but a lot of our time today, you're going to be playing the role of student. I will be the teacher in a demonstration class, and you will get to be a student exploring how students create and share in Seesaw. I'm going to give you ideas for all subjects that middle school and high school students might be taking, how you could use Seesaw in those subjects, and then of course, after we do all of that, I'll leave plenty of time for questions and give you some ideas for what your next steps could be with Seesaw. So if you don't know a lot about us already, I do want to tell you, and I'm excited to tell you that at Seesaw, our mission is to inspire students to do their best. What we really have here with Seesaw is a platform to foster student engagement. And that's going to come in the form of a lot of creative tools. And students are going to have so much choice for how they show what they know. So they can express themselves in so many different ways, and they not only can share their voice, but they can demonstrate a lot of student choice. And as they're using Seesaw, they're developing this portfolio that they can show others. So from a teacher perspective, I am excited to also tell you that you're going to have lots of ideas at your fingertips and save a lot of time. We have a lot of things ready to go for you, ready to use right off the bat. And what you'll find with Seesaw is when you have students responding and sharing in this platform, you can actually lug home fewer papers. And so that's really exciting for teachers when they hear that for the first time. And as you're saving time as a teacher, that's going to give you more time to focus on your students. I know as a teacher, I just loved the idea of being able to see and hear students show what they know all in one spot. So it's a really quick way to get a snapshot to show what they know, and then even to use that information to better differentiate my instruction. Before we get going too far, just right away, in case Seesaw is really brand new to you, I want to show you or even let you hear what it would kind of be like if a student was responding to even, like, let's say, a math problem in Seesaw. We might have some math teachers joining us today for this presentation. So here's an example of what a student's math work might look like in Seesaw. And bear with me a second while this opens on my computer. What I'm going to show you is an actual entry from Seesaw. This is what it could look like if a student was using the draw tool in Seesaw. They could be typing in some labels and then drawing or writing, I guess I would say, a math problem, and then recording their voice.
I'm going to show you how to find the least common multiple of 16 and 24. My first strategy is I'm going to use prime factorization. So if I start with 16, I can break that down into 2 times 8, which would also be 2 times 4, which would then be 2 times 2. If I look to 24, I can break that down into 2 times 12, which is 2 times 6, which is then 2 times 3. So now if I write that up.
Okay, I'm going to pause there. You get the idea, and you can see if that was a student example that you as the teacher would really glean a lot of information, and you would get to see that student demonstrate their thinking and show you exactly how they solved that math problem. So it's really a powerful tool as far as adding student voice to work. I mean, think of, as a teacher, what you're learning about this student compared to what you would maybe see or have access to just on a paper worksheet, for example. I also want to emphasize at this point of the training, because I think it could be overwhelming if you're very brand new to Seesaw. You're thinking, oh no, this is just one more tool that I'm going to have to use or experiment with in my classroom. I want to tell you that really this is just something that's going to add to or enhance what you're already doing in your classroom. Don't think of Seesaw as adding something to your list. Just think of it as something that's going to just augment the lessons you're already doing in your classroom. And I'm going to show you lots of examples of that as we progress through our training. So a couple of other quick things about Seesaw, and this is really pertinent, I think, for teachers of middle school and high school students. Seesaw is going to work great regardless of the number of devices you have. If you just have a few shared devices in your classroom, it will work great in that setup. And it will also work okay if you have one-to-one devices. So if every student has their own devices, it will work perfectly in that environment as well. And that even includes if the students are using Seesaw on their phones or personal items, or even if your school is a bring your own device environment where students are allowed to bring either phones or tablets or computers. So we have teachers all over using Seesaw with all of these setups. So don't worry about how much technology you have. We will find ways to make it work for you, and I'm going to be happy to show you some of those examples later. Also, don't forget that Seesaw is free. Everything I'm going to show you in this presentation is part of free Seesaw. So this is accessible to you as soon as we leave our training today. You can get right on and start doing this stuff. And it's going to work on any device, just like we were talking about earlier about you finding Seesaw on your device, regardless of whether your students are using Android tablets, iOS devices, Chromebooks, or computers, they're going to be able to find Seesaw. So that's really reassuring for teachers, because sometimes they're nervous about their device setup and whether it will work perfectly for new digital tools. And I want to assure you that whatever you have, Seesaw will be perfect for it. Okay, so before we go too far, let's peek inside a Seesaw class. And you can see this is just a screenshot of a demonstration class that we use for trainings like this. But I want to show you kind of what it looks like from a teacher view. So this would be what it will look like for me, like from my computer when I demonstrate for you in just a minute. You see kind of on the right side of that screenshot that it's a list of student names. So you kind of see like a roster or a list. Those are the student names in the student's portfolio. And then to the left of the screen, you see the journal view, or what some people would maybe refer to as the feed. I could, if I wanted to, if I was in the live class, I could scroll down here, and what I'm going to see is a feed of all student posts. And I will definitely do that for you live here in our demonstration class. Okay, so I'm logged in as a teacher, and later when you log in as a student, it's going to look a little different. I'm the teacher in this scenario, and you will later be the student. But I use this class for demonstration, and what I'm going to show you is what it looks like from a teacher perspective. So up here, this is my teacher name and teacher icon, and this is the student roster like I was talking about a minute ago. For trainings like this one or a demonstration class, since I don't know all of you and I don't know all of your names, I just have letters of the alphabet here. So later, when you're pretending to be a student, just look for your first initial or the first letter of your first name. That will be your name for this class. But in your class later this year, you'll have student names here. Okay, so these are the students. And this is my feed or my journal view. You can see I'm in the journal. This is my student journal, and I can scroll through posts in my journal. You can see posts of all different varieties here, and you might wonder where these posts have come from, and it's because we've been using this demonstration class for the last few weeks in some of our trainings and back to school workshops for teachers. So we have other teachers who have posted here, and you're going to be posting here later as well. So this is what it looks like from a teacher view in the class. And I'm also going to show you how students will log in to the class too, because that's going to be of interest to you. All right, so we're just about ready for you to play the role of student. And like I said, what you're going to see on your screen will vary slightly from what you see on mine, because I'm logged in as a teacher, and in a minute you're going to log in as a student. Now, this is something I want to really clarify, especially in this training that's for teachers of students who are a little older. You guys are all teaching students that are 6th through 12th grade. So we usually assume at Seesaw that those are the students who are old enough to remember email addresses and remember passwords. So your students are likely going to log in to Seesaw with their email or Google address. They're already using that for so many things in your school, and they know how to log in and use their password for that. So in most cases, I'm assuming that's how you will have your students log in. For the demonstration that we're doing today, though, I am going to have you log in with a QR code, and that is how some of our younger students log in, and you certainly have the option to do that with your students as well. But I just want to clarify that I will have you log in with a QR code here in a minute, but you likely will not have your students log in that way. They will log in with email and Google. And don't worry, I'll have lots of information and links for you to help you with that as you're setting up your class later. Okay, so we are going to join a demonstration class, the one that I've kind of been showing you on my screen, called PD in your PJs. If you have been in Seesaw before and you are signed in as a teacher, you're going to want to sign out as a teacher. If you've never had Seesaw before, then this isn't an issue at all. But if you're logged in as a teacher, you want to get out as a teacher, and I will show you how that works. If you've never been in Seesaw before, then that's not going to be a problem. If you're in as a teacher, look for your name and your profile icon there in the top left, and then click that gear icon and then sign out. And that's only an issue if you are signed in as a teacher. And then you'll be tapping I'm a student. And don't worry, in just a second, I'm going to give you the information you need to join our class. So you're going to say you're a student. I know you're a teacher for real, but in this simulation, say you're a student. And then you should have something like this pop up on your screen. If your device or computer is asking you for permission to use the camera, please say yes or okay or allow, because you are going to need your camera enabled in order to scan a QR code. Okay, so you might see something like this popping up on your screen. And I'm going to give you a couple of different ways to sign in. So if you can, go ahead and use your device to scan this QR code to log into our class. I'll show it a couple of other times during our presentation today, so don't worry. And if you're joining me not live, like you're watching this on YouTube later after the fact, it's okay. You can still scan this code and play along. So this will still work for you later. Even if you're watching this as a recording or on YouTube, you can go ahead and scan this code to join the class. I'm going to show you from our class here that I got that information. I got that code by clicking this add or plus students button here at the bottom. And this is where the QR code came from, the one that you're scanning. But I also want to make this available to you too. So if for some reason you were not able to scan the QR code, you can enter this text code. And I'm taking a second to write it down too, so that later if I need to type it in for someone, I can. This is going to be a text code that you can use to join the class, just in case you can't use the QR code. Okay, so that's how easy it is as a teacher when you're ready to get that code. I'll give you a minute to get in as I kind of keep explaining where that came from. When I was ready to join students to my class, all I had to do was click this add or plus students button here at the bottom. So I clicked that, and then this popped up. And remember, I showed you the QR code from here, and then the text code from here. I'm going to stop talking for just a second and leave this on the screen. I just want to look in the question box just to see if people are having trouble joining, and then we'll be ready to move on and you'll be ready to participate as a student. Okay, looks like everybody's doing okay, and my colleague Angela from Seesaw is there, and Seesaw probably giving in the question box, giving you some help if needed. So luckily that is probably working okay for you. Okay, let's move on and get ready to post some items as students in our class. I'm so excited to show you these creative tools in Seesaw, and you've heard me mention them a few times in the presentation, that students really have lots of ways to show what they know through various creative tools. And this is one that is like an easy one to start with, and I did this with big kids all the time. Remember, I was teaching 11th and 12th grade students, and we were starting with this tool very often, even on the first day of school, and that is the camera tool. So the camera is built right in, and it's super user friendly. I mentioned that it's built in because you might be thinking, oh, my students need another app or need to get out of Seesaw to open their camera, and they don't. It's built right in. I should tell you, if your students are on computers or Chromebooks, remember to take a picture. It's just hitting that space bar to take a picture once you've clicked the photo button. But this is going to be a great starting point for your students. And what you can see kind of pictured at the bottom of the screen here are all the different annotation tools within Seesaw. So it's more than just taking a photo. Students can actually add voice to a photo or draw on top of a photo or type words. And I'm going to show you lots of examples from all across content areas where students who are in middle school and high school are using this tool in Seesaw. So one of the first things we're going to do today is add some words to a picture. So if you wanted to, for example, have your students practice identifying adjectives and nouns or labeling something else they had done in class, this is a really useful activity. In my composition class, my students learned about learning styles, and so we would often label our photos with different learning styles that best fit us, and so we would do an activity like that. In this case, because you're just playing along with me today, I don't care if you take a picture of yourself or something else in your room or outside your window. I just want you to practice using the camera and then adding words to a picture. It could be adjectives and nouns or whatever else you want to type on your picture. And then the last thing that students and that you will do is always to click that green check to add that photo to Seesaw. So that's what we're going to practice today. Remember that when you're doing that, you're looking for the first letter of your first name, because we really don't have your name in this class. I don't know your name, so we just kind of have to use something a little simpler and just use letters of the alphabet, and then you'll be, that's how you'll identify yourself in this class. Okay, so here's what I'm going to have you do in our demonstration class called PD in your PJs. I want you to look for the activities tab. You can see it's a light bulb. It looks just like that. What I'm showing you there is a student view. So you see the activities tab, and I want you to find the activity that looks like this. It's just the same picture that I was showing you a minute ago. I want you to find that activity and then tap the add button. So that's where I'm going to have you take that photo, and it can be of your view or an item in the room you're in or yourself, and then use that label tool or even the drawing tool to add words to that picture. I'm going to show you different ideas for how you can use this activity in your class, but for now, we're just practicing taking a picture and then adding words to the picture. Can we take about 2 minutes to do that? And then I'll show you some of the entries that we have coming in. I'll play a little background music for you as you're working on your pictures. And I can't wait to take a look in just a second to see what you're adding. All right, thank you so much. I popped into the question box just to see if I could help a few folks get logged into the class. So that's why I threw the QR code back there on the screen. This is the activity that we're working on, and I'm super excited to see what you were able to post. Now I'm going to pop back into that demonstration class, like the one we have been talking about, and look here, I'm in a teacher view. So remember, what I'm showing you now from my screen looks different than what's on your screen. I'm logged in as the teacher. And look, I can see that I have 21 unapproved, 23 now, posts coming in. So that lets me know that you guys have been able to successfully play along. So that's really an exciting, awesome feeling. So what I can see are some of the posts coming in. And as the teacher, I have the option to approve those posts. So you can see that nothing is going to get added to Seesaw unless I approve it. And you have the option of in your class settings of deciding if you want to approve items or if you want them to just come in automatically. I was teaching 12th graders and I actually did not have approval turned on. We talked a lot about norms and behaviors around posting in Seesaw, so I trusted them and I never had anything inappropriate posted, and it made my workflow a little faster to not have to approve those. That was an awesome picture. I love that. So I'm kind of trying to look and talk at the same time. You are doing so well, you all. I'm so excited to take a closer look at these later. But as a teacher, you can approve, and you might choose to do that depending on if you're working with a little younger students or if you're just getting started, so you can definitely do that. I do also want to show you that you can save a little time as a teacher by just clicking that approve all button, and I'm going to do that in this case because we're all grown-ups here and I'm pretty sure that these will all be just fine. So I'm just going to approve them all with one click, but of course you don't necessarily have to do that. As a teacher in your class, you can leave it on or or not. Oh man, a lot of things coming in. I'm so impressed how well you all are doing. So you can see in this training, we're not necessarily going to get to look at all of them, but you're logged into that class. So you are welcome to go back and peruse them in more detail. But I do want to respect your time today and just make sure that we keep plugging along with the webinar. But I'm sure your entry is there. So even if I didn't get it approved, I will approve it eventually after I pop out of this view here in just a second. Thanks, everybody. You did a wonderful job. It looks like you knew how to use that camera and get words added to those pictures. And my favorite part of trainings like this is showing you the way that students are really using those types of skills in the middle school or high school classroom. So in this case, you did an activity. You might not have even known that what we were doing was called a seesaw activity, but it was. And I shared that activity with you as my student. You responded using a creative tool, in this case, the camera, and then I approved your responses. So that's a workflow that your students can use when you start back in your class. So here are some other ways that older students, middle school, high school students, are using photos in their classes. This is a real example from a 7th grade history, or what they would maybe call social studies class. Okay, so just a picture of what's going on in my class. This is a really simple way to start. I always did first day of school, here's the class on the first day of school type of pictures that were really nothing fancier than this, just a picture of what was going on in the classroom. Students could take it themselves or I could take it. Then you can see just a simple label on that photo, but just to document what's happening is a great way to use that camera tool. This is a student in a high school art or ceramics class taking a picture of the artwork they created, and then of course they can use all those annotation tools to add voice or to add a caption to explain. I think in this case you can't see it pictured here, but this student explained what type of glaze he used in his ceramic creation there. And this is an example from one of my high school ELA classes. Students could literally just take a picture of text of a book they're reading. So picture of a page in the student's self-selected book, and then she underlined the simile that she found. So she was demonstrating her understanding of figurative language there. So students can draw on top of a photo as well as add labels on top of a photo. So this is super helpful for me as a teacher to see what they're learning and understanding, even in something like their self-selected reading material. Here's an example coming from a high school chemistry class. So the student is labeling different parts of their experiment or what they were doing in class that day. So lots of great ways to use that camera tool. Now I want to talk about the drawing tool, like what I would sometimes call like the blank whiteboard. I'm not going to have you post anything to our class, but you're welcome to play around. If you want to practice drawing and hit that drawing button, you are welcome to do that, and you can post it to our class if you want. I just want to show you all of the tools available to you in the drawing screen. And you might not think that middle school or high school kids would use this, but I used it every day with my students in 11th and 12th grade. We used it mostly probably in my public speaking class. We were doing a lot of sketchnoting. I'm going to give you some tips and ideas about that. But students can not only draw in the screen, they can also erase, and they can type labels. They can also adjust their thickness. And you still have these wonderful annotation tools here. So after you create your drawing, if you're on a computer or Chromebook, you can record, and add some voice. You could also type labels or add a caption. Okay, so if your students are on a mobile tablet like a Kindle or an iPad, they can record and draw at the same time. But if they're on a computer, as I suspect maybe many of your students are, maybe on a Chromebook, they can do a drawing and then record afterwards, which is really cool. And I'm going to show you some ways that in all subject areas, big kids are drawing in Seesaw. And like I said, I was sketchnoting or having my students sketchnote a lot in one of my classes, but you could have students do math problems, and that's kind of what I was playing for you earlier on in our presentation. Don't forget, even if your students are using a computer or Chromebook, they can still use a stylus to draw or write. They can do that on their touchpad, so that if you're thinking, oh, I don't know how my students would draw on a Chromebook, that would maybe be a helpful tip for you. Here's an example coming from like a high school social studies class. That's the example I showed on the screen a minute ago, but they can do a diagram of something they're learning about in maybe their lecture or their class presentation. Here's a science example. And so you can see a drawing that a student did in a science class, and then maybe they've also annotated it and added their voice. And here's something I want to show you because I think this will be a helpful point too. As a teacher, and you can't see this on your screen in your student view now, but as a teacher, you can see students' responses all in one screen. So if you gave them a task and you wanted them to sketch something, you could see all of their sketches all in one screen. So there's an example of what that would look like there pictured on the screen. The other nice thing too, don't forget, is that Seesaw also has the capability for students to receive a lot of authentic feedback. So teachers and even connected parents and family members, if you choose to do that, can leave a lot of constructive feedback. And it also is giving students an opportunity to kind of reflect on their progress or growth as they're thinking about what they've learned and what they know. So you can see that pictured here just in this one example that I've included there on the screen, that not only can students reflect, but they also have an opportunity to receive feedback. And that's powerful too. And that's not just with the drawing screen, but I wanted to show you what that looked like there on this particular screen. I'm also not going to have you post a note, but you are welcome to play around with that tool as well. We also have a tool in Seesaw called the Note tool, and it looks like this. It's going to allow students to type a short response. Big kids use notes in the following ways, probably even more than I could even think of, but this is how I was using it in my classroom. And you can see this doesn't look like an essay or a full 2 or 3 page document. When my students were typing essays, we were not doing those in Seesaw. But what I needed students to type quickly in Seesaw were things like journal entries or their responses to a prompt. I also sometimes use the note tool for tickets out the door, exit tickets, various forms of formative assessment, or even sometimes when I wanted them to reflect on a certain task or assignment or to think forward and set a goal, I had them use this note tool. And you can see that picture there is an example from a high school algebra class, a student reflecting on their work in algebra class or how they did on their past assignment or test. So this note tool is useful just for a quick snippet of writing, maybe not a full essay that they work on for a week in class, but something quick. And again, I think the best part is that in Seesaw, you can see student responses all on one screen. So I don't know, I feel like that saves you a lot of time and a lot of clicks as a teacher. Obviously, students have a lot of other digital tools that they can use to share writing with you, but I can't think of a lot of other ways where you could see all of that writing all on one screen. So I think you would find this to be a really handy and useful tool. So for your students, as you're thinking about other tools that they could use in Seesaw, I want to mention briefly, again, you're not doing this yourself, but I want to mention this to you, that students could also use the link tool. And that just means that if you are using other digital applications or tools for students to create work, they could add those links into Seesaw. So as an example, and if you're not using these tools, that's fine. I'm just giving you some examples. If your students are creating in Adobe Spark Video or Padlet or something else that's going to generate a link for them, that link could be shared in Seesaw. I know as a teacher, I found that useful because my students were using iPads and I was worried that a lot of their creations were just living on the iPad forever and just stuck there. They weren't saved anywhere. They had created something, but it didn't really have a place to go. And so if your students are creating in other applications, those links can be shared in Seesaw. Or even if your students are just finding articles or videos as part of an assignment and they want to share those links with you, Seesaw is a good tool for that. And the best thing here, I think, is the integration with Google Drive. I'm making an assumption that your students are already using Google Drive. They're probably already Google users if they're middle school and high school students. So I'm guessing they're writing Google Docs or creating Google slide presentations. Those files can go right into Seesaw. So assuming that your older students are Google users, you are going to find this tool particularly useful because it's going to integrate right with their Google Drive. They can pull files right from there, right into Seesaw, or they could even pull photos or PDFs from their computer. So I think you'll find that particularly helpful. So like as an example, if you have students creating presentations in Google Slides, this is an activity you could use to have them share their presentations. I'm kind of going to go fast through this part, but you'll get these slides later in your email. And then you can go a little more slowly through to look at all of these activity ideas. I just wanted to make sure you had plenty of ideas for how Google and Seesaw would work together for you. So just briefly wanted to bring that up. Or I would often have my students put their papers from Google Docs into Seesaw so that they could have an opportunity to practice reading them aloud. That's a strategy that helps them catch a lot of errors and kind of evaluate their own sentence fluency by reading aloud. And that was big kids, of course, and that's something I was having them do, but you'll find lots of reasons probably why you could have your students pulling in files from Google into Seesaw. And just real quick, this is something I made as a teacher a couple of years ago because people would often ask me why I used both Google Classroom and Seesaw, and I did use them both every single day. Google Classroom is what I used for course management, and I use Seesaw in all the ways that I'm describing to you in this presentation. So I just wanted to make sure to include that. You can take a closer look at this later, but just in case you are wondering, if you're using Google Classroom, you can keep using it and then think about how Seesaw would work really seamlessly with it, and that they are both, parts of your digital workflow. So I just wanted to make sure you had access to this in case that would be helpful. Here's something else you could look at more closely too. We do have activities ready to go for you that talk about how you can integrate all of those Google tools with Seesaw. If your students are already using Google Apps and Chromebooks, I wanted to make sure you had some resources. Again, just going through this really quickly, but you can look at this a little more closely after we conclude today. Okay, let's do one more activity, and I'm really excited about this too. And I hope you don't mind me asking you to use the video tool. You can video the floor if you don't want to record your own face. I just want you to practice with the video tool. We're going to do the same thing we did before. I'm sharing an activity with you. You're going to respond using one of Seesaw's tools, and then I'm going to approve your response. So it's the same flow. And let me kind of show you what that will look like. Oh, good. We have even more items coming in. How exciting. You're a great crowd, everyone. I will pop back in the question box later, and I hope to connect with you all maybe later on Twitter too. So here's what I would do if I was finding an activity. We didn't talk about this a lot, but I'm going to be spending a few minutes coming up here in the presentation about finding activities in Seesaw. I could browse Seesaw's activity library. Then I have the option of checking different grades and different subjects here, and I can filter my results. I think my sample class is set for 8th grade. And I can say that I want to share this activity with you, okay? And I actually think it's already waiting there for you in Seesaw, but I'll just kind of walk through these steps for you. Do you remember how I was in the library? I'm in the library and I'm looking at some options for how to get started. Okay, I'm going back through a couple steps just to give you a closer look. I'm in the library. I can decide what grade I want to search for. And if I'm teaching middle school or high school, my activities are going to be sorted here by subject. So hopefully you see a subject that's close to what you're teaching. We're working so hard to build up our activity library for both middle school and high school. So if you teach something that you don't see represented there, be assured that we're working really hard to get that updated. But here's a lot of the subjects that you would be teaching, big kids, and that Google collection that I talked about a while ago. I'm going to want to share this activity with you. And you can see it's already there if you click your activities tab. But I'm just telling Seesaw that I'm ready to share it with my students. And remember, we've called that class PD in your PJs. I've already shared it, so I'm not going to share it again, but that's how I would do that. I would click that green button and then I would share it with your class. And then in your student view, you're in that student view, you're going to see it under the activities tab. So if I'm looking here in the activities tab and I see respond to a question, I can see that 7 of you have already responded. So you're doing well. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to work on that. And here's the question I'm asking you. I probably got ahead of myself by not telling you the exact question I'm asking. I love this activity because you as a teacher can adjust it however you want. You can ask or post a question, like you could post it on a board or project an image onto the screen that asks your students a question. I'm going to ask you, my students, what are you excited to try with Seesaw? And all you have to do, again, is tap the add button and then the video tool and record your response, or you can ask me any questions you still have. And like I said, if you feel silly and you don't want to record your face, that's fine. You can just record something that's happening outside your window, but I want you to practice with the video tool. And that is because that's what middle school and high school students are doing all the time in their own social media. You think about Snap stories or Instagram stories, students are really comfortable recording themselves. So this is a tool you might want to use if you teach big kids. It will be very familiar to them, just as far as being able to talk into a device that will not be unfamiliar to them. Let me play a little music for you again. We'll just take a minute or so. I do want to respect your time, and I've gone kind of long today. So we'll do this as our last activity, and I'll have a few final slides before I take questions today. See if you can get a video response posted for me in our demonstration class. Okay, thank you. I was just popping into the question box for a minute just so I could see a couple of other topics that maybe we needed to address as we go on here. Let's jump into our class, and I'll show you a couple of different views based on some questions people were asking. So remember, students can post, and I think, Pat, maybe this is what you were talking about. Students can post something anytime using one of Seesaw's tools. So a student could add a file from Google Docs, let's say, or take a photo or type a note, and it does not have to be part of a Seesaw activity. And then I'm just going to see those responses as I scroll down in my feed. So in this instance, you can see this student's post is in response to an activity, and you can see that gray bar label at the top of that post. But here I can surmise that this person took her picture and wrote words on the picture, and it was not part of an activity. She's just practicing using the tools. So you can see this feed or journal view. Students can post things that are part of an activity or not part of an activity. And look here, you are doing wonderful, everybody. I have 35 unapproved posts. So that lets me know you're being really productive in our session here today. I think I am going to click that approve all button, and you'll just have to be patient with me because I will love to get into our class later and look and listen more closely to your responses. I'm not going to be able to do that right here as I'm presenting, but I will take a closer look at those later. So I think some other folks were asking, how could I look at all of the responses all in one place? So remember, a second ago, I was in the journal view. Pretend these are your student names. These are the student portfolios. So I'm looking at letter D here, pretend student letter D. This is D's portfolio. And of course, we have more than one person whose name starts with D. So in this case, it's not a totally perfect system. But in your classroom, this is one student's name, and then you're scrolling through their feed or their portfolio. That's their portfolio. But if I also want to look and see all of the responses all on one screen, I do it this way. I'm clicking that gray bar. It's actually telling me I have 40 responses, and that's, again, not a perfect system because we're sharing some first initials here, but you could see your students' responses all on one screen there. Okay, so that's how you're doing that by clicking that activities tab and then that gray bar. I saw that question popping up in the question box, so I wanted to make sure we talked about that. Something else that someone asked too that I can address to, wondering if Seesaw would work with other learning or course management systems besides just Google Classroom. And I think my answer to that would be whatever you're using for course or learning management, Schoology, Canvas, whatever, just keep using that and then use Seesaw in the ways that I'm showing you. So Seesaw is not necessarily what the tool you're using for course management, like to assign homework or collect homework. Instead, it's how students are engaged and creating in your classroom. It's a platform for all of those, creative tools. So I think you can use them both pretty seamlessly. And remember, a link can go, a link from anything can go into Seesaw. So if they're creating somewhere else, you can take the link and put it into Seesaw, or vice versa. You can take a post from Seesaw and put it somewhere else. But I don't want to get too far off topic there. Let me show you a couple of ways students use video in Seesaw. Here's a great example. These are 7th grade math students. They're my friend Kara's students, so we're borrowing this video from her. She's teaching 7th grade math here.
So, in this paper slides, we'll be discussing how to multiply integers, rules for multiplying integers, and how to solve integer word problems. Keep in mind the multiplying integer rules.
So that's an example of a paper slide video, and just one example of a way students could use video in Seesaw. And like I said, students are comfortable recording themselves. It's what they do on their own social media all the time. Here's an example from foreign language.
No soy Mexicano. Jugar fútbol. Yo no jugar fútbol americano. Yo.
So this is a foreign language class. The student has an assignment probably to draw a self-portrait and then say some sentences about themselves, practicing their foreign language. So I thought that was a great example. That's a high school foreign language class. And then this is one of my students in an 11th grade ELA class. You can listen to that later, but very similar and a great example for how high school students are using video. I think you might remember me saying I taught speech. Public speaking, not everyone's favorite class by any means, but we recorded all of our speeches, of course. So we had a nice portfolio of students speaking by the end of our semester together, and that was a really great way for us to reflect on our growth. Okay, so you've been hearing me talk about activities, and I've shown you a little bit of that activity library. And let me take a minute to do that with you before we conclude today. We are kind of running long here, so I want to make sure we do this for a second. I think I walked through these steps a minute ago, but remember, you can browse that activity library if you want. Of course, your students can just post right to Seesaw, but if you want to look at some of the activities in Seesaw, you can do that right here. And remember, what I was saying is that when you're teaching older students, you're looking probably at one of these subjects, and you can use the scrolling bar. You can also type here and search for a certain topic or keyword, but I really recommend getting started just by looking at some of the first 5 activities really that we suggest for any content area. In fact, I'm doing another live webinar here in just a few hours. So if you want to sign up for that, I'm going to talk to you about what some of your students' first posts or first activities could be. But we have really nice collections here to help you as you get started. Another thing to think about too is that you can also connect families to Seesaw if you are interested in that. I did do that with my 11th and 12th grade students, and I can tell you it was really transformative, but that's an option that you can decide if you want to use. We're not talking much about that in this webinar, but if you join me again for Brand New to Seesaw Part 2, we will talk in a little more depth about how to connect families. A little bit of text there on the side of your screen explains how that flow or process works. Once students post, after teacher approves, then the family members get a notification, and then they can leave comments if they want. The feedback, like you saw on an earlier screen, you can look at this a little more closely later. I just want to make sure that you know that you can connect families if you are interested, and that will be something we talk about in Brand New Part 2. If you click these slides later, you can, or open these slides later, you can click on that link to register. I also wanted to make sure you had access to this information. You can set up your Seesaw class for Google or email sign-in, and you even can get a printable so that you can show or hand that out to your students if interested. Again, we're not going to talk too much about that, but I wanted to make sure you had access to these resources because, like I said, I'm assuming with your older students, you want them to connect that way. Seesaw has a really robust privacy policy, and I wanted to make sure you had access to that information as well. If Seesaw is new to you or new to your school, people might be asking you questions about that, and we have lots of resources for you. So take a look at that screen, and you can reach out to us if you have more questions about privacy and Seesaw. We also have a great help center or help site. It's help.seesaw.me. It looks just like this, and where you can see the arrows pointing on my screen, those are 3 different ways you can reach out for help from our help site. So that might be your first stop if you have questions about Seesaw after we conclude today. But of course, I'm excited for you to connect with me on Twitter, as I talked about earlier. So we offer free PD all the time, like this, PD in your PJs. You can find more sessions questions listed at web.seesaw.me/PDs or PDS, and you can see that site there. We also have lots of recordings still available to watch on our YouTube channel, so you're free to do that as well. Now, everything we talked about today and everything I showed you is free, but we do have some schools that purchase our paid program called Seesaw for Schools. And that's because they have lots of users using Seesaw and they want to build a more comprehensive record of their students' learning and collect a little more real-time data. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to us at the website that's listed at the bottom of your screen. So you stuck with us for about 45 minutes today. You can consider Brand New to Seesaw Part 2 unlocked. You are ready to go for Part 2. So I hope you will register for that so we can get more in depth as far as how students get into your class and how you connect families. I would love to see you in that upcoming session. And here's a couple of other ways you can connect with the Seesaw community pictured there on the screen. I know we've run long, but I want to answer a few questions before it's time to go. If you need to hop out of the webinar today, that's just fine. I'll stay around for a few more minutes to answer questions. If a survey pops up on your screen after we conclude, please do answer and give us your feedback. That's how we make our presentations better, so we value your feedback there. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes answering questions, and I will be excited to see you in Brand New Part 2. Okay, Melinda, hi. Thanks for joining me today. You're asking for if students and teachers can label a PDF. So students can add labels to a JPEG, like a picture file, like a PNG or a JPEG. On a PDF, they can record voice or type a text caption. Thanks, Josh. I'm glad you could join me. I appreciate your positive feedback in the question box. You are welcome, Josephine. I'm glad you could be here. Okay, Pat, that's a great question. I didn't have a great example of that pictured on any of my slides. Pat is asking, how could I see an example of students giving feedback to other students? And I just didn't really have a great picture of that, but it would just look like comments underneath a post. And so that's a really good piece of feedback for me, and maybe I can add an image of that in my presentation for next time. Thanks for that, Pat. That's a good reminder. Okay, so I'm just kind of trying to scroll down the list and see if I've missed any questions. I know for a while some of the questions had to do with getting into the class. It looks like all of those were taken care of. Okay, so Abby, hi. Students have to select their name in a QR sign-in class, but your big kids will probably be signed in with email or Google, so they will not be choosing their name off a list. So what we simulated today with the QR login is a little different than what it will work like for your students because they will be logged in with email. Denise, okay, later when you go through the slides, you can take a closer look at my slide about Google Classroom. It gives you some really specific examples that were from my class, which was ELA, but that'll give you at least some ideas. Denise is just asking about how Seesaw and Google Classroom work together. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm happy to talk about that too. Okay, so I think because more than one person was using the same letter of the alphabet in this case, you might not have seen your post showing in my approval queue as I was showing it on the screen, or if I was picturing all activities at once, you might not have seen yours. I think some people might be worried that I didn't see their post, but I'll make sure everything is approved and then I will take a closer look later. Abby's asking if students see each other's work, and that's your choice as a teacher in your settings. You can choose whether you have that enabled or not. So we think it's really a valuable part of the process for students to be creating for an authentic audience and authentic feedback, but you can turn that off or on. Ashley, I think I talked about Schoology because I had seen your question earlier. Yes, whatever you're using for course management, just keep using that, and then Seesaw can just augment or supplement that. It's a great way for students to show what they know. And I think that the recording of voice and the video recording, is really unique, I think, to Seesaw. I know you can't do that in a handy way in Google Classroom for sure. And just the parent connection too, which for me, like I said, was really transformative. Okay, Amy's asking if students have their own folder. Like students have their own journal or portfolio. So like I think I was kind of demonstrating that when I was clicking on the letter D earlier. Like you would click on one student's name and that would be their portfolio. So I hope that that was kind of clear. Join us for part 2 though, Amy, and we'll go in that in a little more detail. Just scanning through the question box. Julie, hi, great name. Your school uses Outlook. Okay, so any email, like when students set up their email account, their Seesaw account, they can sign in with an email. So I think that will work just fine. Okay, Pat, so we kind of walked through the library. Yes, I just want to clarify for Pat and anyone else who's wondering, you can look through Seesaw's activity library, and that just gives teachers who are new to Seesaw ideas and suggestions for different things you can do in Seesaw. But of course, students can post without it being an activity. They can just hit that green add button and then just post a picture or a note. Okay, someone's asking, could you use Seesaw instead of Google Classroom? You sure could. I would just use both. That's what I did, every day in my classroom with 11th and 12th graders, but you can definitely think about that in your own digital workflow and think about what will work best for you. Hi, Ben, you're asking, do parents have access to all student work? Just if you choose to connect family members and parents, that's your choice as a teacher in your settings, then they can see anything that students post in their journal, but you can also potentially have a private teacher folder that would keep some things separate. And sometimes teachers connect families to one class but not to another class. So if you wanted to keep something private from families, you could have students in a second class. Oh, Adina, I'm sorry you were having trouble with the camera access. I know that's frustrating. Hopefully you can watch the recording later if needed and kind of catch up on anything you missed. Abby's asking a Google Classroom question. Let me see if I can make sense of it really quick and give you the right answer. It's been a while since I've practiced this. She's asking, is there a way to post an assignment straight into Google Classroom so that students can just click the link from Google Classroom and go straight to Seesaw? Okay, so maybe what you're thinking about, like in Seesaw, we use the word activity. And so you would not share an activity with a link in any way in Google Classroom. Your students would respond to the activity in Seesaw, but then anything they created in Seesaw could be downloaded and put back into Google Classroom if that was kind of the flow you wanted. I get what you're saying, like you're wanting students to click something in Google Classroom and then be able to complete their activity. And I don't think that's exactly the way the flow would work, but I'm happy to brainstorm that with you, Abby. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, we could kind of walk through that. Okay, I think I'm getting kind of to the bottom of the question box here, and we have been online for a really long time, so I think I'm about to wrap up. But if for some reason you ask something and I missed it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle there at the bottom of the screen, and I look forward to connecting with you in a future session again really soon. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye-bye.